Our next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Rodney Esty.
Hot Rod.
Hey.
Back again on the program.
That's right. Hey.
I'll tell you.
I'm going to read his last line here as Rodney. I saw John Fell made his comeback last week. I'm so tired of Charlie from Starkville getting all the attention. He's not the only cult member in Mississippi. Ha ha ha.
I told my doctor, I said, doctor, what do? I swallowed a bottle of sleeping pills. He told me to have a few drinks and get some rest.
And another thing, Vonnegut, I'm putting cancel payment on the check. From Back to School. Did you like Back to School? It's late Rodney, I guess.
Yeah, well, any Rodney was good Rodney, but I thought after Caddyshack and, come some of the HBO specials, they started just trying to shoehorn him in the movies without really taking pride in them.
Back to School's great.
Of course, he was on so much cocaine.
Isn't that something when you read about, he's in his 50s and he's smoking weed nonstop and doing coke all the
50s?
time?
He was in like his 60s.
I guess
maybe even 70s. The fuck? Oh, I tell you, no wonder he sweat like that.
Well, here's Rodney Esty's question. I was listening to Jericho speak about getting a fine from Vince McMahon because Ric Flair bladed himself. He said it was for $15,000. And I've heard many others fined for this or that in the WWF or other promotions. What happens to the money they're fined? Does the promoter company keep it? Does it go back into the company? Is it still listed as income that's taxed? And do you have any fine stories?
Well, that is an interesting question. Is it still income that's taxed?
That is interesting, yeah.
Here's the thing. I was never fined in the WWE, definitely. I've heard about, and I think Jericho got fined because Flair got juiced because Jericho was just in the match and let it happen or whatever the fuck. And Vince was on one of those things. But didn't he also fine Batista $100,000 for?
I seem to remember that. Yeah,
I think he did for getting juice. He keeps saying that he doesn't want it. Then every once in a while, he likes the fortunate juice, but somebody doing it on their own is going against his directive, so he has to do something. But he also knows that blood makes the match, like that time Brett got it with Davey Boy at the In Your House in 95, and then he was able to convince Vince, well, look, it's up above I tagged the steps or whatever because it was up above his hairline and he went a little jagged with it. And Vince wanted to believe him, so he believed him. And Brett got away with it. It was great, and it made the fucking match. It's ridiculous to have wrestling without any blood. And it's ridiculous to have wrestling where the guys are trying to hardway each other and don't even know how to do those things anymore. We're not talking about a generation of Ron Wrights and Harley Races. And, so obviously you should use the blood or use the blade and sparingly so that it still has impact, not all the time, but I'm totally disgusted, again, when I see fake blood. I never saw fake blood in wrestling until 20 years ago, and it disgusted me then, and it disgusts me now, and I would never use it. The only time I've used it is on some fucking mouth angles. But anyway, so yes, I believe the fine. I do not know how it is reported. I would be hot if I had to pay tax on my fucking fine. The money definitely goes back to the company. In Mid-South, they find, obviously, Watts fine guys also. Of course, then it was $50 or $100 or $200 instead of these ridiculous amounts that pay-per-view made possible. But I never got fined there either. Because I would have to go back and check my records. I may have been fined once for being more than 15 minutes late on a spot show. And I think I was because I remember griping to Grizzly. Because I was like, what the fuck? Grizzly, we've made this fucking schedule and we were 20 minutes late. Well, it's the rules. But and it was $50.
Were you fined in Houston for that match where Watts fined everyone else?
No. It was the Midnight Express and Ernie Ladd with myself versus the Rock and Roll Express and Hacksaw Duggan. Carl Fergie was the referee. Dr. Death Steve Williams ran in to save at the end along with Terry Taylor when we were kicking the shit out of the baby faces. Let me get this list right. Dennis Condrey was fined for doing the back rake without leaving bloody furrows because it was unrealistic. Bobby Eaton and Hacksaw Duggan were fined because they got in a chair battle, a chair duel. Bobby had picked up a chair to try to, when Duggan was chasing him outside on the floor, just to, because he didn't want Duggan to catch him, and Duggan's a bigger baby face, so Bobby wanted to have some protection. Well, Duggan was all into it, so he grabs a chair, and they have a little chair fencing duel. Well, that was in front of the referee, so since they buried the referee, Watts fined Bobby and Duggan, and he also fined Carl Fergie, the referee, for allowing himself to get buried without calling a disqualification. He fined Ernie Ladd for using his taped thumb as a gimmick when a gimmick had not been authorized by the booker in the match. And he fined Dr. Death for running in shorts and flip-flops because he looked unprofessional and he wanted to show the match on TV, but he couldn't because he ran in shorts and flip-flops. And Ricky Morton, I think, got fined for something. So me and Robert Gibson, basically Watts watched the fucking 6-man tag match that we thought was great and found all the things wrong with it that now I find wrong with things now that I have the experience, and he fucking shut everybody down. But I think me and Robert Gibson were the only ones that didn't get fined out of the whole thing. But anyway, it goes back to the company. Yes, it does. And I don't know whether it's declared still as income. If that $100,000 on Batista was declared as his income and then he paid the taxes on it on top of that, that would be that'd be painful.
The entire time you were in Mid-South, a whole year, was there anyone who didn't get fined?
Oh God. Well, I mean, obviously Ernie Ladd was there on and off. He, I think that's probably the only time he had fined Ernie, and he did it just to make a point that Ernie should have known better. Goddamn, Buddy Landell was paying installments at one point. He really was. He'd either dressed unprofessionally or he'd been late or he'd, done something. And what Watts would do is he would fine him because he wanted to teach him these things, but he wouldn't take all the fines out of his check at the same time, or elsewise he would have been paying Watts. One time his fines were more than his check that week, which was at least over $1,000. But then as Buddy started getting it, Watts would bonus you also. And he would either take Grizzly's word for it that you had gone over and above or did a really good job or got something over, or he'd see it himself, and then you'd get the plus. You'd get like $150 for Baton Rouge plus 50 or plus 100 or whatever. And that was his way of kind of giving it back to you. If you should have made probably $250 anyway, but at least it was more satisfying when you got $150 as a payoff, but you did such a good job, he bonused you an extra 100. So Buddy was making installments on his fines for a while, but he'd get a little of that back later on, when he started doing good. He was a football coach. He's running a fucking college football team. Is what it was. And that's the way that it worked. And the heels were one team. They all the heels, even the opening match guys, everybody from Pat Rose on up would stay to watch the Midnight Express and or Butch Reed have the main event because they knew that they were going to be needed to come and help us fight our way back from the people because there weren't enough cops. And that's what they did because they were part of the team. And the baby faces also, the underneath baby faces hung around because they needed to watch the matches. And also because they knew that none of the girls were going to leave until the rock and roll were finished. So if they wanted to get any pussy, they needed to hang out too. But they were the other team and everybody worked together.